what's a performance marketing myth that frustrates you most?
The myth that frustrates me the most is it probably comes back to, these vanity metrics, right? We talk a lot about them. There's a time and place for them, but at the end of the day, I worked for big agencies and I saw clients and agencies alike celebrating, we generated 1 billion impressions from this earned media thing, but meanwhile, okay, well, what do we get from this? What's measurable? It's really important, I think, for businesses to understand, okay, there is a time and place for these types of metrics, but how does this connect now to what we're actually trying to achieve from a business standpoint? And so I would say leaning into the fact that in marketing, like there's going to be investments. Not every dollar is going to result in a return, but if it's invested smartly, like in the top of the funnel for the purposes of not just generating billions of impressions with no, measurable outcome, but rather, hey, we did this because it built this warm audience that we're using for this other campaign, that's a win.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today, we're thrilled to have Anthony Chiaravallo on the program. He's the founder and CEO of Vallo Media, a performance marketing powerhouse that's helped everyone from venture-backed startups to Fortune 500 brands like Nike, Amazon, and FedEx turn ad spend into serious revenue. With over 16 years of experience and over 100 million in media spend under his belt, Anthony brings a fresh and sharp take on how to drive ROI through paid media. He's also a recognized thought leader. He's been featured in PR Week, 40 Under 40 honoree, and a regular speaker at major industry events like South by Southwest, DigiDay, and others. We're going to dive deep into how marketing actually drives growth. No fluff, no vanity metrics, just results. Should be a fun conversation. Thanks for coming on, Anthony.
Thanks, Brian. Excited to dive into this.
Yeah. You've made the leap. You left traditional agency world to start Vallo Media. Maybe you can start there. How did you get into agency work and kind of what's your origin story?
Yeah. So I actually started my career in sales way back, pre-social media days. It was just sort of this burgeoning industry. And so I was actually in print media, started my career in New York City, a sort of boiler room startup style, just 100 outbound calls a day, smile and dial, get people on the phone,
Everybody has to do that. Like, was your undergrad in business as well?
It was, yes.
Yep, me too. Yep, same.
And, I'm looking for marketing jobs. I majored in marketing. I had a minor in philosophy, but, there was no marketing jobs. I didn't have any, good internships or anything. I was just kind of, doing my own thing. And someone told me, hey, you should get into sales. It's a good industry. You could control your own earning potential, control your own destiny. And those things were appealing to me. Right. And so I spent probably quite a few years doing that. I eventually, ended up in digital, doing sales for a digital agency.
Reading the Brian Tracy books and all those books as well.
Yeah, reading all the Brian Tracy books. Exactly. Like, pretty much devouring, my CEO at the time had a whole library, like a lending library in his conference room. And so I had all the audio, I had all the CDs. Yeah. This is pre-Audible days. Right. So driving around.
One of my college jobs was selling cars, and I almost dropped out of college because I was making so much money selling cars.
Wow.
It was like 10 or 15 grand a month, and I was 20 years old. I'm like, maybe I don't need to. And then I saw these guys that never went to college making $500,000 a year. The managers at the dealership. I'm like, maybe I don't need to complete college.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I think that's a whole separate discussion as to whether college is really necessary, right? But I totally hear you on that. When I was doing digital sales, actually was selling to car dealerships, and they're a fun breed to sell to, right? So I was driving around, visiting car dealerships, closed quite a few deals that way, doing car dealership websites and things like that. From there, I eventually pivoted to actually being a marketing director. So I finally, after maybe 10 years in sales, I made the transition to marketing. And this is when, Facebook ads and all those sorts of things were really starting to take off. And at the time, I did that for a few years at a healthcare nonprofit, and then, tried to start my own thing back then. Didn't work out. So I ended up actually setting a goal for myself. You know what? I want to be at a big agency. I want to be, back in New York City. I want to be working at some of the biggest agencies in the world, because I wanted to have an opportunity to work with those really big brands and just have a front row seat to, how some of the best marketers and the best brands in the world do this. And so I did that for 6 years. I built the performance media practice within WPP. I was part of BCW, which is one of the holding companies. I've gone through like multiple iterations since then. As I'm sure you've seen, there's a lot of disruption in that space happening now. And so did that for about 5-6 years before striking off on my own. COVID hit 2020. My position got eliminated after another merger slash restructuring, and had a client on the side at the time. And so I decided, you know what, this is my chance. Tried to do it before, didn't work out, but I want to take my own thing and I want to go full time with it. And so that's how we got started. That was about 5 years ago. So
Wow.
It's just been a lot of fun since then.
A lot of parallels with us. I mean, we have the same color polo shirt on.
Yeah.
We both started in sales. I mean, I technically took a detour on Wall Street. You know, I say I kind of spent a decade on Wall Street in finance, but I basically did a variety of sales jobs. You know, commercial real estate broker. You know, I was a financial advisor. I sold a variety of things in my 20s, mortgages, you know, just a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And then I kind of got into marketing the same way. I was like, hey, how do you make leads? Like, how does that work? And we had this really great performance marketing team at a startup I worked at in San Francisco. It was a solar startup. I didn't even want to work in tech. And I found myself at a solar tech company called One Block Off the Grid. And we had this just really amazing performance marketing team. And I just got really interested. That's how I got into it. And so kind of corollaries there.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, how's it been, you know, looking, you know, 5 years back, going out on your own? Because I did this too, you know, a couple of years ago. I'd love to get your thoughts. You know, would you go back to, you know, corporate life, or is it just like no turning back at this point?
I would say it's definitely the best decision I've ever made. I'm really enjoying the freedom, the flexibility, the unlimited growth potential, right? I'm not saying I would never go back. Like, you know, maybe I'll sell the company in a few years. And I've had a lot of interest from other, we work for agencies as well.
Right.
They'll hire us as consultants, help, you know, scale their paid media teams, you know, service some of their clients. And, you know, and some of them have offered like, hey, would you sell your agency to us and then come work for us and, you know, build this function within our company, right? So I do entertain that idea, but I'm just loving what we're doing right now. I didn't build or engineer the company to be sold, right? And so it's not like, you know, we're maximizing EBITDA and all these things, right? At least not yet. You know, certainly we might pivot that way in the near future. But for now, I'm just enjoying like the opportunity to just build something that's 100% mine. Got a, you know, pretty good team behind me, and we're really scrappy. You know, we're still very much a boutique agency. I would say we focus on just a smaller roster of really high quality clients, and just been loving every minute of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's get into the philosophy behind performance marketing. How do you define performance marketing today, maybe versus, you know, 5 or 10 years ago? Or has it changed?
The definition really hasn't changed. I think what's old is new again in many ways, right? Performance marketing is any type of marketing that's tied to a measurable outcome, you know, specifically a business outcome, right? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to generate leads, grow revenue, you know, drive sales? And so when we're talking about performance marketing, it can be transactional. So Google ads, Facebook ads, any type of digital marketing where you spend X and you get Y because you're tracking that person, that customer, that prospect through that entire journey of, hey, I saw an ad online, I clicked on it, I went and I took some desired action on your website or wherever it may be, whether they completed an online sale or fill out a lead capture form. And so it's really about that measurable tie to a business outcome.
Where do startups, you know, waste money here in particular? And you could take that in two parts, you know, big companies and established companies and also startups. I mean, this is very much a startup podcast. So maybe you could speak to the founders out there of, you know, what mistakes are they making in performance marketing?
I would say the biggest mistakes are spending without strategy. And so, you know, a lot of times startup companies will just start throwing money at Google ads or Facebook ads. And we've seen it because we audit tons of startup companies. We audit other paid media agencies. And what I've seen is that there's a lack of attention given to the strategy development. And what I mean by that is actually taking the time to do some research, right? Like understand your customer, who they are, what are their demographic qualities, what kinds of media do they consume, you know, where are they spending their time, what are their pain points? Going in, looking at your own website analytics data, looking at your own social media accounts data, and then using that to formulate some kind of hypothesis. And then it doesn't mean that it's right, but hey, at least we have something here to go off of that is informed by who our audience is and what data we have available to us. And then from there, developing a strategy and saying, here's where we should show up, here's how, and here's the messaging that we think is going to resonate based on the research that we've done. Now let's test it. Let's, you know, launch some campaigns and let's launch some experiments online, whether it's A/B testing or multi-channel testing, and understand, hey, at least we have some kind of hypothesis that we're trying to test, and then let those ads run for maybe a month, maybe a month and a half, and then start analyzing the data and saying, okay, what's working, what's resonating, where can we pivot, where can we move some dollars around, and then of course taking a what I call full funnel approach. A lot of times companies just want leads so badly, they just want to dump everything into lead gen campaigns, but they're not really taking the time to educate their audience, to nurture them, to generate awareness, to build, engagement. And those types of things are actually super valuable for driving more efficient performance outcomes. Because, we're a performance marketing agency. Companies come to us, they want leads, they want sales. And I'm like, let's just take a step back here. Before we throw all your money in these lead gen campaigns, let's actually build an audience. Let's actually build awareness for what you're doing. And ultimately, taking that more strategic approach is going to just result in a much more efficient use of those marketing dollars.
How do startups know it's time to turn on the performance marketing? Right? Because you usually have startups it's like founder-led sales. They're out there just reaching out to people and booking demos and closing deals. How do they know it's time, like, hey, it's time to start throwing some cash at some channels here online?
I would say when they're at a point where they've hit a plateau, maybe their strategy with founder-led sales has hit a peak, they've tapped their entire referral network, whatever it may be. There comes a time where they're making good money and they can spend a few $1,000s a month, anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 a month on paid ads to run some tests. And I would say, don't just dip your toe, because if you just want to spend a few $100s here and there, it's not even worth it. Like, commit to at least a 6 to 12 month test, because there's going to be that 3-month learning phase, right? There's going to take a couple weeks to do the research and develop the strategy, to set up all the ad accounts, and also build those audiences, right? And so people think, okay, performance marketing, I could just throw money at Google Ads and get a return and all is good. It doesn't really work like that. You really have to take the time to develop a strategic approach, build that funnel, and then start warming up audiences, right? The people that click on your ads, most of them are not going to convert on that first visit. It's going to take multiple touch points. There's going to take a multiple different channel approach to where we're actually engaging with audiences in a regular cadence. In other words, we need to make sure that as a brand, as a company, whatever it may be, we have a marketing system that we've put into place. And it takes time, and it takes an investment to actually build that, right? Because there's agency costs, there's creative costs. So you're not just throwing money at the ads, you're throwing money at everything that goes into building an effective marketing sort of flywheel. And I think that's the most important thing if you're a startup, is saying, hey, we're willing to invest this much over 6 to 12 months to really, build this machine. And then most importantly, making sure you have a qualified agency. We've audited hundreds of agencies, and there's a lot of them out there that are just kind of set it and forget it. And, it's a problem, I think, in the industry as a whole, because it gives marketing agencies a bad rap, but it's also having a really negative effect on the clients' businesses, because it's very easy to just waste money, with these ads platforms.
Yeah. No, I know how hard it is. I mean, when I ran demand gen teams at startups, the paid channel is so complex that I literally did outsource it. I got a marketing agency to do it for me, especially like the SEM stuff, because you just the search engine stuff, all the keyword research, all the bidding strategies. It's very, very complex to get right. And you're better off paying somebody that knows what they're doing than trying to figure it out yourself.
No, it's so true. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. And we work with clients. They're like, hey, just teach our social coordinator to do this. I'm like, it's not something that you teach in a 2-week training. I was like, my guys have 10,000 hours in the platforms. Like, that's the kind of like expertise that you need. To your point, there's so many, different technicalities into how these ads are set up, structured, built, optimized. And it's not something that you can teach a marketing coordinator in 2 weeks. And I tell them, I said, look, I'm sorry, we can't help you. Like, if that's what you're trying to do, it's not
go to
real.
YouTube, have them start watching some videos, and then come back to me in 6 weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
When they realize how hard it is.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it for sure.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, and I had whole teams. I had whole teams that did this stuff at multiple companies, and yeah, you definitely want to get expertise. If you can't hire the right person, you should hire externally, right? Find somebody externally who knows what they're doing. So you probably have multiple case studies in mind for startups, but is there one that kind of stands out to you that you want to talk about? I have one here that you 5x revenue for a gaming company. You can talk about that one, or maybe there's another one that's really exciting to you.
Well, I love the startup world, right? So let's talk about that. When I first started my company, I spoke briefly about this in the beginning of our conversation. I had a client on the side. This is like, circa 2020, and a buddy of mine had started a company. It was a QSR, so quick service restaurant, and they're called Playa Bowls. At the time, they brought the acai bowl, which is like a fruit smoothie. I don't know if you're familiar.
Oh yeah, definitely. I used to live in
Yeah.
Hawaii, so very familiar.
Perfect. Yeah. So very popular in all these surf destinations. So I'm a surfer, love the ocean. I live by the beach. And so I live at the Jersey Shore. And a friend of mine, him and I used to go on surf trips all over the world. So Puerto Rico, Nicaragua, California. And we'd always get these acai bowls. And it dawned on him one day. He's like, why are these not available at the Jersey Shore? Like, we've got a, beautiful stretch of beaches here. We've got, thousands of hungry beachgoers, and the only food options are pizza and cheesesteaks. And he's like, after a surf session, like, I feel good, I'm healthy. I just, I was in the water paddling around. The last thing I want is a slice of pizza. I want to get something where I feel like I'm keeping that, health kick going. So, long story short, him and his other co-founder was also a fellow surfer, and they had the idea to say, hey, let's bring these acai bowls to the Jersey Shore, because again, no one was really offering that here at the time, right? This was back in maybe 2014. And so they started the company. She actually made the acai bowls at home. So she had like all the recipes and stuff. And so dragged a patio table down from his apartment onto the sidewalk across the beach from where he lived, and just started blending up bowls and started passing them out on the beach and all these things. And so they did that for probably a summer. And then by the following season, they had a single location, and all of a sudden it started growing into this phenom. And there was like lines around the block. People were like, what is this? They'd never seen it before. Meanwhile, these bowls have been, in Hawaii and California for a decade or more, right? This was a brand new concept though. And so they actually grew organically through Instagram to probably about like 15 or 20 locations just in and around, the New Jersey area. And we stayed friends, but I was still doing my city job. I wasn't really involved in the company. I helped them with some things in the beginning. I, set up their website and their domain for them. I helped them with some sales decks for investors. But they got to the point that they started looking for outside capital. And at this point, they had grown 100% organically just through Instagram. And they didn't really know marketing. They didn't have that expertise. She was a bartender / graphic designer. He was a medical device salesman. And now they've got this concept that's blowing
like
up.
20 location acai bowl place. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's like, but investors aren't taking us seriously. They're like, show us your market research, show us your customer database, show us this, show us that. And he had nothing. He's like, we tried making an app. It didn't work because it didn't integrate with our POS system. So he calls me up and he's like, we need your help, because he knew that I worked in marketing. I was, big agency. So I said, all right, I'll help you guys out. And for me, this was my ticket out of the city, because at the time I was commuting like 2 hours each way. And I was like, this is a grind. And I was doing it because I wanted to get ahead in my career. Right. And so I was like, this could be my ticket out of here. So at the time I was like, yes, I'm going to help you guys. We're going to do this. And, we looked at their entire ecosystem, and I said, the first thing we have to do is you got to start capturing customer data. You guys have nothing. You're completely reliant on your, 30,000 Instagram followers, but you don't own that data. Instagram owns that data. I said, you need to get customer information as soon as possible. So I researched different solutions. We found this turnkey provider that could basically plug right into their Clover system, and they gave you a free app with it, and it automatically captured customer information at the point of sale, phone number, email, whatever the person wanted to give. It dropped it into a database. It had all these marketing automations that came out of the box. So like, you could send campaigns through text message, through email. There was, automatic birthday coupons that were sent out, miss you coupons for lapsed customers. It's segmented by VIP customers. And so all of a sudden they rolled that out, and they started capturing thousands and thousands and thousands of customer data points and information. From there, we set up their local SEO. So, having a single platform, we used ChatMeter at the time, and that helped to basically get all of their locations into one central platform that they could manage, like Yelp and Google reviews, and respond to reviews at scale. And then also at the same time started building up a separate email list, capturing people who came to the website through a pop-up form. So, very simple things. But a lot of companies don't know these things when they're just starting out. And so probably within a year and a half, they gathered over, I don't know, a few 100,000 customers. The marketing machine like really took off. They doubled the amount of locations, and then they got their first investment. So they got bought for about 65 million, and that was through Tamarix and Partners. I think it was a VC firm or a PE firm. I think maybe even out of Korea or something. And then from there they just took off, and then eventually they got the second round. I think they just sold for maybe like 110 million for this next round. And so just a tremendous success story. Honestly, I was honored to be a part of it, because just seeing them now, I think they have like 150 locations.
Oh, wow.
They really just took over the market, at least here. Like, yes, they have a really big
On the East Coast, yeah.
presence, but now they're all over. They're in college towns, they're in coastal towns, up and down Florida. They're out in Colorado now. And I would say what really set them apart, because there were competitors, that started coming into the market, it was really the brand experience. And so the CEO was really big, like, hey, he took a page out of like the Starbucks book in a way. He's like, this, we want Playa Bowls to be like the third place. And so it became this like hangout spot for Gen Z. And it just took over with that market. And they had like, the surf videos playing, they had like couches and lounge chair. They really created like an incredible brand experience. And I think, that's partially also why they were so successful.
Yeah, that's amazing. A really great example of like using technology and marketing to scale. Speaking of metrics, pulling it back into, what CMOs are looking at or heads of marketing, why are they still chasing impressions and clicks? Why is that such a thing still?
I don't know, and I have these conversations every day. I will work with a company actually where the board member is like, why are our CPCs going up? He's just adamant that the CPCs are, I'm like, because they always go up. Like that's just what happens. Like, let's talk bigger picture here. Like, what are we really doing? Right. And so, this particular client, they invested so heavily in the lower funnel, they completely ignored the upper and the mid funnel and the brand. And the result, they got crushed by their competitors over the last 10 years. And because they were just so focused on, like you're saying, those clicks and driving that attribution through like paid search, completely ignored the value of building a brand. And ultimately what happened was their competitor 5X them in 10 years. And so now we're working with them. We're trying to reverse that and fix that. But, so many companies are just stuck. And I feel like they're stuck in the 90s with the internet marketing stuff, I mean, and now things are changing so fast with AI and everything. There is just, so much that a company has to think about, where if they don't embrace like this new way of being and doing through AI and through marketing and through performance and brand, they're going to cease to exist probably over the next 10 years or less, because that's the pace of change that we're looking at.
Yeah. And I want to get to the AI question real quick, but I want to kind of drill down on KPIs. So if not clicks and impressions, what should startups starting to kind of scale up their paid channels care about?
Yeah, so quality over quantity. That's our mission, is to really help educate startups and clients about this, because we have so many clients that we've audited over the years, and they're celebrating their click-through rate, and they're celebrating, look at all these clicks and impressions that we've generated. And then we dig into the data, and we're like, most of those users are spam. They're just bots. Like, you guys, they're not even spending 1 second on the website. You're spending all this money on social media, and you're celebrating all of these great clicks that you've gotten, and they're not even real people, right? And so I think the KPIs that people need to look at is quality over quantity. And so how do we do that? Very simple. If someone's coming to your website, like I was saying before, chances are when they click on that ad, they're not going to convert that first time. So you need another way to qualify them. It's very simple. You can look at what's called a behavioral conversion. So in GA4, Google Analytics, website analytics, whatever platform you're using, look at the time that those users are spending on the website. Is it more than 2 seconds? Are they bouncing immediately upon landing? Are they visiting multiple pages? And you can set different conversion goals in Google Tag Manager for these qualifying events. And that's what we do. In order to really zero in on that qualified traffic, we'll set up behavioral conversions with the understanding that, hey, not everyone's going to make that sale when they come to the site. We need another way to qualify them. More importantly, we need to send that signal back to the ads platform and say, hey, this is a quality user. Find us more like that. And so from an optimization standpoint, most of the startups and just actually big companies are doing this too. Actually, it's probably even more prevalent with the big companies because they got money to waste. They're throwing good money after bad because they're just driving spam traffic and they're not looking at these qualified metrics. And so what happens is the AI, the algorithms that are within the ads platforms, the machine learning, you're feeding it bad data. And so if you're feeding it bad data, it's just going to compound your problem. And so when we're auditing, a campaign, we're like, hey, your account is flooded with junk traffic. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to stop the bleeding here. We need to set up the proper triggers, the proper conversion tracking metrics to make sure that what we're doing is driving those qualified users. Secondly, okay, now we can send those right signals back to the algorithm and actually optimize, towards those higher quality customers. Because ultimately, if you're trying to increase revenue, you're trying to grow sales, those are the KPIs that matter. Are we getting more qualified leads in the door? Is our revenue growing? Are we making more sales? And in order to do that, you have to look at the media metrics that will actually qualify your users. I'm not saying clicks aren't important, impression share and all these things. Yes, there's a place for that, right? Because there is a lot of value in building a brand. And sometimes you do that through running video ads and retargeting people who watch more than 10 seconds of the video, right? So there's ways that we can strategically leverage these KPIs that you're talking about, the media metrics like impressions and clicks and click-through rate. Yes, those still matter, right? But they have to be looked at holistically, within that full funnel picture.
Yeah, I love that. How do you know, as a founder or head of marketing, that the channel's working and you should increase your spend in that channel? And then kind of at the end, how do you know you've saturated that channel and you should probably move on?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say look at your return on ad spend, right? And not every company is going to have a return on ad spend model. It's obviously big in e-commerce and things like that. It's maybe if you're more of a service-based business and you're trying to generate awareness or thought leadership, right? So I would say understand what that North Star metric is for your business, right? And we always say like the two most important metrics in marketing are your cost per acquisition, what it requires or what it costs for you to acquire a new customer. And then what is the lifetime value of that customer, right? So if you can know those two metrics, those are going to be your two most important KPIs in marketing. And you'd be surprised about how many, CMOs don't know that, and these are for big companies, not just startups, right? And it does come down to customer acquisition costs. It's not always a profitable formula. And so, to your second part of that question, how do you know when you've plateaued? The trick is to just scale very slowly, right? And so we don't, when we're looking at a market, we'll typically start off spending just a small nominal amount. And then once we have the right formula for audience, message, channel, et cetera, bid strategy, then we'll start to we'll gradually increase the budget, a few thousand extra here, a few thousand extra there, and we'll wait, let it run for a week or two, see, okay, is our acquisition cost going up, going down? Is it staying the same? And so it becomes this like iterative process where you actually just scale slowly and you add more money until you see, okay, all right, we reach this point. Now we see that our acquisition cost is starting to go up. Okay, maybe we've, hit the max on this channel. So it does become this sort of feedback loop that you have to implement so that you're able to tell and say, hey, we've really maxed our potential on this channel. Let's think about, what else we should be doing.
What channels out there should you get started on? And what are some new ones that maybe people don't know about?
I would say, the low-hanging fruit in paid media is typically search and social. That's where you're going to get the most efficient performance. Google Ads specifically is very lower funnel. It's a higher intent channel, meaning that, people are going to Google, they're searching for something very specific, your ad shows up. Social is more of like a discovery platform. People are there, they're consuming other content, engaging with friends, family, and then they see an ad and like, ooh, that's interesting to me, but they weren't looking for it, right? So those are typically going to be the low-hanging fruit. Obviously, retargeting is table stakes, and retargeting is simply someone comes to your website, we drop a pixel or a cookie on their browser, and now your ad is following them around the web. So that's actually a really good way because, again, you already have someone who's interested in your brand. They came to your website, and you want to make sure you have a way to re-engage with them. And then to your other, when we're talking about, new potential channels, right? There's obviously new social channels that have been around like TikTok and Snapchat and all these things, but also AI. And so AI is becoming more prevalent in terms of how people are using and searching for things. Like I go to ChatGPT for most things that I used to go to Google for, right? And so how are you as a brand or as a company, as a startup, how are you optimizing the answers that AI is giving to people who are researching topics relevant to your industry or your product or your service? And the way you do that is not all that different from how we've done SEO in the past, because the AI is not just making up answers, it's pulling it from information that's already on the web. It's pulling from Reddit. It's pulling from human generated content on company blogs, etc. So that strategy becomes even more important. And an AI is actually a great enabler because it makes it a lot easier to create content at scale, but also the AI in itself is actually pulling that content back into the large language models. And so when companies are thinking about, which channels should we be on, it's kind of like what's old is new again, right? Because the AI is pulling from these different platforms like the Reddits of the world and the blog posts, and earned media too is huge. So PR is still relevant, and it's important for companies to really think about that. In addition to using AI for their own purposes, how are we actually feeding content, to these engines?
Yeah, now that was going to lead into the next segment. What are you seeing out there with AI and media in particular, and how is it impacting your work and scaling these startups and paid media channels?
Yeah, so we've been using AI since the beginning. It really has just helped to make our business more efficient. I can use it for research. We can use it to help brainstorm ideas. We can use it to develop copy for different ad campaigns. We can use it to, craft blog posts and conduct SEO research. So it's got a tremendous utility in terms of how it's being used and how it's operationalized within the business, making it more efficient. And then we're also leveraging AI ad types. So Google's had something called Performance Max. It's been out for a while. An AI ad type that basically optimizes your placement of your ads based on a couple of things: headlines, images, and also the placements are like what I would call channel agnostic. So in other words, the ads are showing up where Google thinks it will drive the best result at any given time, as opposed to the search ads, which are limited to the search, or if you're running YouTube ads limited to YouTube, the PMax ads will show up anywhere based on where Google thinks it'll drive the best result. And so now they've just released the next iteration of that, and they call it AI Max, which is basically taking PMax, which a lot of marketers were skeptical. They're like, this is a black box. We don't have control over where our ads are showing up. We don't know which headlines are driving the performance. And so there was a lot of pushback from the industry. Meanwhile, we were testing it the whole time and driving great results for our clients. It does tend to drive spam though, so you have to be careful. And that's where those earlier conversion, things we're talking about come into play. If you have a way to qualify users, you can really eliminate the amount of, junk traffic that was coming from these new ad types. And now with AI Max, Google has sort of opened the black box a little bit more, meaning that you can look at, certain things that weren't available with Performance Max, like where is this actually showing up? What are some of the, best performing keywords or placement types? And so we're starting to see a real rapid evolution in terms of the ad types that are being offered from an AI perspective. Bing actually shortly after released their own version of Performance Max. We've got Meta doing Advantage Plus targeting, which, by the way, not really a good performer for us. We've tested it against manual targeting, and it drives more efficient CPMs, but a lower quality click and a higher cost per click. So I always recommend if a startup or if a brand wants to try these new ad types, always test it against the more manual, traditional. And then, let the data determine, hey, is this working for us or not? It may work for one brand. It might not work for you, right? And so having those tests, having that testing strategy in place will really help, a founder or a startup determine, hey, is this really worth pursuing right now? Again, it's changing so fast. It might be totally different next month.
Yeah. What are you seeing in the kind of the ChatGPT space, kind of, with that surface area? You have Perplexity, you have ChatGPT, you have all the other, you have Google has their own Gemini. How do you see that unfolding as a channel for marketing?
I think it's going to become the future of search, right? I think with Google's Gemini, like I start using Google's AI mode now, because sometimes I would go to ChatGPT and write a question, but then I'm like, you know what? I don't want to, have to go into the AI. I just want to go to Google and ask this question because doesn't need my whole history and like whatever. And so, we're starting to see that evolution already. Google now, every single search result can potentially return an AI result. At the same time, you can dive deeper and then actually start, conversing with it. And it's only going to get better and faster. And it's going to be exponential because, as these systems evolve and as we progress towards, AGI or the AI super intelligence, now they're like, we're just going to skip over AGI. We're going right to the super intelligence. It's going to get crazy. And I think it's going to change everything in terms of like how people interact with the web and with with search in particular. I think there's some implications for social media as well. Meta's investing heavily in AI. They've already started incorporated AI summaries into the comments section. They've got AI search now. And so we're just going to see, a lot more of this. And as marketers or as founders of companies, you have to be on top of it, because what's happening is things are evolving so fast that, consumer behavior is going to change as well, and how consumers research products. For example, in the future, we might just have AI agents do our shopping for us. And so it's going to be the brand's AI agent communicating to your personal AI agent to find the perfect product or service for you, right? I use ChatGPT all the time. I just planned a trip to Maine using AI. I was like, give me the top 5 resorts. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I want to do. Give me my itinerary, and boom, it spit the whole thing out. I went and I looked at those spots and ultimately moved forward with one of those itineraries that AI recommended. But you have to ask yourself, well, where's AI getting that information? They're getting it from TripAdvisor. They're getting it from blog posts. It's those same things that we've been talking about before, that AI is pulling all this information. So, a lot of those things that have been foundational from a marketing perspective are still important, because again, that's where the AI is getting all this information from.
Yeah, it's a fascinating development. And it's interesting that OpenAI hasn't monetized yet with ads. Sam Altman's talked about this a bit, but they're looking at it, but they haven't yet done it. But I can imagine there'll be a monetized version. Maybe it's a YouTube Red versus a normal experience, where you can pay to kind of remove the ads.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we'll see how that.
Yeah, we'll see what comes. I think definitely it's coming for sure.
But let's talk a little bit about creative. Where does that kind of rank in your performance marketing playbook on importance, right? You kind of talked about Performance Max and it's kind of swapping headlines and stuff, but what have you seen out there? Maybe there's some new tools that you're using to generate more creatives at scale, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that space.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing the impact of AI, I would say, on creative. We have Meta now offering AI creative tools just built into the platform. So that way, when you're building an ad, it's like, oh, here, we actually just created the whole ad for you right within the platform.
The artwork and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Amazing.
The Mid-Journeys of the world are out there creating AI art, and now they're creating full-blown AI videos and movies. Like, we had a vendor reach out to us on behalf of a healthcare client. They created an entire pharmaceutical commercial with AI. And it looked pretty good. Like, it looked like it was pretty good. They're like, yeah, all right, we just created this for you as part of the pitch, and we're going to distribute it, to all these healthcare providers. So, I mean, it's already here. We're already starting to see. Now, would it be effective? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I think that there is still, that human element from a creative standpoint that AI is not fully replicating, but certainly there's been a lot of brands. Even Coca-Cola did an AI, video. I think it got some backlash, right? And there's other brands that have done it really well, and it was really well received. So I think you just have to know your brand, you have to know your audience, and what is the right time and place for it. From a creative standpoint, just in general, it's very important from a performance media standpoint. I know that we typically we'll run a lot of programmatic campaigns. We have our own in-house programmatic platform. And so we'll run display ads at scale across the open web. And we find that HTML5 ads perform 4 to 5 times better than just regular static or GIF display ads, because it's just more engaging. It's animated, and so those types of things are still really important. From a social perspective, UGC is performing really well when it's done, properly with different creators, but then also video editors. And so something we're doing right now is we're working with like 3 or 4 UGC creators. We then take the selfie videos that they make, we pass it off to a video editor. He works in B-roll, he adds captions, and those ads are doing really well for a variety of different clients. But it really comes down to just the sheer number of variations from a creative standpoint, because especially on social media, you need that, because you got to give the algorithm something to optimize against. So we like to test, UGC content versus brand content. We test, static versus animated, carousel versus regular, story versus in feed. So these are the types of tests that startups should be thinking about, because ultimately you want to feed that algorithm more content so that it can optimize your campaigns and generate a better result. And so ultimately that's what we try and do from a creative standpoint, is have a lot of different sort of things in rotation. For example, emotional versus rational messaging, highlighting the features of a product versus the benefits. And then when you think about it too, one piece of advice that I would give to your audience is think about it through the lens of the marketing funnel. So what kind of videos can we do that are more top funnel, like awareness driving, educational, talking about these sort of more upper funnel types of things? And then, okay, how does our creative differ now in the mid and the lower funnel? What type of messages are we now telling people at these lower stages versus the top? Because again, you're going to be retargeting people. So you want to retarget those people from the top of the funnel with your lower funnel ads. And it's important that it follows some kind of sequence, some kind of narrative to where you're actually nurturing people and moving them through that funnel, because that's how you're going to get those more efficient conversions, by just throwing all your money in those lower funnel ads, just going right for the sale, right? It's almost like, we talked about like car salesman, right? He just goes in right for the sale without taking the
Here's
time.
The contract.
Yeah, here's the contract. Here you go. Sign here. Like without taking hey, take the car for a test drive. Let me show you the features of the car. So it's the same process, except, from a digital marketing standpoint, you have to really think about that strategically.
Yeah. I hope listeners out there are starting to get a appreciation for how complex this space is. If you're just getting started with, paid channels, should you start at the lower end, the bottom of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, or the top of the funnel?
I would recommend starting at the top, right? You want to work your way down. I would say one of the biggest mistakes we see is that brands go right to the bottom. Of course, we all want to get the sale. We all want to make the money. We all want to grow the revenue. But if you're not investing properly, then you're just going to be, throwing money away. And I've seen companies do it and it never ends well. Start at the top, build the awareness and build the audiences, right? When we run a top of funnel ad, we're talking about impressions and video views and clicks, right? And these metrics, they seem very vanity. Oh, it's a vanity metric. It doesn't really matter. It didn't drive a sale. But the reality is that there is value in those views, but not just for the sake of generating the view, for the sake of building what we call warm audiences. So when we're running a top of funnel ad and we're driving those video views or we're driving those clicks, it's not just about the view and the click, it's about building that warm audience. And so Meta and Facebook and all these platforms, right, they have the ability to retarget people who watched a certain percentage of your video. Hey, we want to target every single person, because it's literally dirt cheap. You could reach 100,000 people for a few $100 with these video ads. So we want to retarget every single person that watched the video for more than 8 seconds. Okay, we've got a warm audience here. These people didn't click past it. They actually watched the video. It means they're interested. Okay, let's segment that out. That's a warm audience pool. Now we can start serving them those mid-funnel ads. Now we can start serving them those lower funnel ads, because we've taken the time to educate them, to, talk a little bit more about the brand, whatever it may be. You want to have those warm audiences as opposed to just running those sales ads. That's like, again, go back to the car dealership. You walk through the front door, he hands you a contract. No, you got to really take your time to nurture that individual.
How do you balance kind of the art versus science of the performance marketing?
I would say, yeah, it is both, right? And so when we're talking about the science, everything is, very data intensive. Well, what is the data saying? And what about this? And what about that? And this metric and this KPI, right? But at the end of the day, marketing is also an art form, because you have to have something that speaks to people, that is resonant, that emotionally connects with people. And in the world now where everything is, mediated through a digital platform or an AI or a phone, people are craving more human connection. And I think the brands that can really build that emotional connection through whatever it may be, it could be a really compelling founder story. It could be just a brand that really speaks to people who have a specific pain point, right? Finding whatever that is that sets your brand apart is so important. And that, differentiator, that thing that really can make your brand unique in a marketplace, that's what's going to be the number one, I think, value proposition. Because again, the algorithms and the data, that's all well and good, and that's great. And there's a lot we can learn by following the data, but it also tends to optimize towards the lowest common denominator. And so you want to make, because, if every brand is following what the data is saying, then every brand will end up with the same ad. It's like everyone, the algorithm says that white works best with this text and this background. It's like all of a sudden you have all the exact same ads as your competitors. And so, leaning into what it is that makes your brand unique. I go back to the Playa Bowls story. They had a great founder story. They were both surfers. They traveled the world. They, ate these acai bowls and they just were like, why is this not available here? Right? They found a problem, it was resonant, and that became, the fuel that just really propelled their brand. And I would say, leaning into that sort of thing is what's, really important and can help brands succeed.
What's a performance marketing myth that frustrates you most?
The myth that frustrates me the most is it probably comes back to, these vanity metrics, right? We talk a lot about them. There's a time and place for them, but at the end of the day, I worked for big agencies and I saw clients and agencies alike celebrating, we generated 1 billion impressions from this earned media thing, but meanwhile, okay, well, what do we get from this? What's measurable? It's really important, I think, for businesses to understand, okay, there is a time and place for these types of metrics, but how does this connect now to what we're actually trying to achieve from a business standpoint? And so I would say leaning into the fact that in marketing, like there's going to be investments. Not every dollar is going to result in a return, but if it's invested smartly, like in the top of the funnel for the purposes of not just generating billions of impressions with no measurable outcome, but rather, hey, we did this because it built this warm audience that we're using for this other campaign, that's a win. And so I would say, the biggest myth is becoming less reliant on these feel-good metrics and instead thinking more holistically about how we can actually drive performance through every stage of the journey and every stage of the funnel, because that's what you really want as a business, is to grow. And that's how you do it from a marketing standpoint.
What's the most misunderstood part of campaign attribution?
The most misunderstood part, it really goes back to our earlier conversation about quality over quantity. And so when people are looking at attribution, they're celebrating, large traffic volume, they're celebrating clicks, they're celebrating all of these things, and they're not really looking at, okay, well, what is the attribution telling us? And some clients are too reliant on attribution. And so they go very, very deep into what I call, or what's called last click attribution, where they say, well, look at all these great sales we got from our Google ads. And because the person clicked on it and they went to the website and they made a sale, but they're not looking at how other channels influenced that person. And so somebody might see a social ad, or they might see a programmatic ad, which we run all the time. And then they come to the site, or maybe they don't, but then they do come back at a later time from a totally different source. And they ultimately end up converting. Who got the credit for that sale, right? The person saw a social media ad, they saw a programmatic display ad, but ultimately they came to the site organically. And so the organic channel gets the credit for that sale, but you're not looking at and you're not measuring or understanding how these other channels influenced that person. And so we do have a way to actually say, hey, X number of people were exposed to our display ads. They didn't make a purchase right away, but they came back to your site within a period of 30 days from another source. It could be any other source, and they made a purchase. So can we take direct credit for that sale? No, but we could say, hey, we influenced it because they saw that ad, and there is certainly value. Maybe not a lot. You could assign a percentage. Okay, we want to assign a 20% weight to the user, seeing this ad. And then you can come up with what's called a multi-touch attribution model, in where you weight the influence of different channels. And then that helps you as a business decide, hey, where do we want to deploy our dollars, knowing that, yes, this one channel got the credit for the sale, but all these other channels played a role in influencing that person. And there's a cool example I could share. One of our clients was running Facebook ads, and they weren't getting any leads from the ads, but they were still getting leads, but they were just being attributed to other sources. So as soon as they're like, all right, we'll just turn the Facebook ads off. Clearly it's not working. They turned the ads off and the leads stopped. So even though the leads weren't coming directly from that channel, it was having a pretty big influence. People were seeing the ad, going to Google, doing more research, eventually coming to the site from somewhere else, and then ultimately, becoming a potential customer.
A really good lesson. Thinking about the future, where is paid media heading in the next 3 to 5 years? I see a lot of, AI platforms that promise to do, all your performance marketing in a box, right? You have, probably hundreds of AI SDR companies out there, doing cold outreach. Like, where is all this heading in 3 to 5 years? What does this even look like? And then there's this funny phrase in marketing, and marketing ruins everything. I'm sure you've heard it.
Yeah,
right?
And I don't disagree, actually, even being a marketer.
Yeah, the marketers move into any new channel, any new method, and AI is no different. But where do you think this is all heading in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, it's definitely hard to say, right? I think things are changing so fast. So I would say, immediately, I don't think media buying is going, 100% to the AIs, right? Because we've had AI ads forever. Like Google's had their smart ads for the last, 5, 10 years. And the truth is they perform horribly. They were really just designed to get small businesses onto the platform to start spending money. But in terms of performance, they're horrible, right? And so there still needs to be a human strategist, at least for the time being, that can actually look at the business, but also look at all the different marketing channels and decide, hey, here's how we need to kind of like pull the levers on each of these various platforms to generate the result that we want. Now, AI has definitely taken a lot of the grunt work out of media buying. And that's a good thing, right? Because it's freeing up people, marketers and media buyers from doing these repetitive tasks that are better off being done by a robot anyway, because they're just more efficient. Like we have clients that have, 200,000 product SKUs in a search campaign. Like, there's no way a human can manually optimize all of that, right? And so this is where AI becomes really useful. In terms of like where it's going from here, I think that it's really hard to tell, but we're just going to see more and more prevalence of AI in not only the media buying space, but the advertising space. It's, really moving fast. There might come a time in the very near future, like I was saying, where it's just AI agents talking to AI agents all day long on behalf of people. And if that's the case, then, hopefully that's a good thing. It gets us, away from the screens as much as, and maybe we could actually go outside more often. So we'll see what happens.
No,
But
we'll find a way to be stuck to our screens.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. But
Hedonic treadmills are everywhere.
Exactly.
Let's wrap up with a few wrap-up questions. I used to call this rapid fire, but I'm going to call it wrap-up. It's kind of like a rapid fire, rapidish fire. What's one metric marketers should kill today?
One metric to kill. They should kill CPC. They're focused too much on their cost per click. They need to look more at revenue.
What's more powerful right now, search or social?
I'm going to go with social right now because there's just a lot more attention, I think, in terms of opportunity there.
What's a brand that you would love to work with but haven't?
Brand I would love to work with, I would say, that's a good question. I would like to work with Gibson guitars because I'm a musician and I've worked with Taylor guitars already. So I'm going to say Gibson.
Gibson? Yeah. You have a Les Paul?
I don't. I have a Stratocaster. So you'd think I would say Fender, but actually I just have, a lot of respect for the brand.
Yeah. Well, the problem with the Les Pauls, they're so much heavier than the Strat.
Are they? Yeah. I can imagine.
They're just like a block. They're very blocky and heavy. The Strat's like, I don't know. It's just lighter and more, you can move around with it.
Yeah, that's why I like the Strat. Yeah, it's easy to transport. Yeah. I enjoy it.
I'm a musician as well. I can't guitars off here. Last campaign you saw and thought, wow, that crushed.
Last campaign I saw? That's a good question. That Lego campaign was really good. It was Rebuild the World, I think. I'm a huge Lego fan, but also actually I'm a Nintendo fan. So I do like the Switch 2 launch, actually. They've been doing a good job with the Switch 2 launch. And seeing all of the, the different Instagram posts. Those are like two of my favorite brands and I follow them on Instagram. So their content is just...
I'm a Nintendo fanboy. I mean, I was 5 years old when I got the first NES, and
nice.
Been a fanboy since, 40 years now.
Same.
I literally I think I have a Nintendo.
I see the Zelda. Is that the Zelda?
Yeah, I got
NES
the Zelda. Cover? Yeah, still a gamer, but yeah, special place in my heart for Nintendo. Most overrated paid media platform today.
Most overrated paid platform. That's a tough one. I would say probably TikTok. Just because, I don't know. I mean, look, TikTok can be very effective. But we don't run too many ads on TikTok just because the brands that we work with their audience not really on there. But I do know that it is, it can be effective for certain companies.
What's one thing founders get wrong about marketing strategy?
Not taking the time to really, do the research. Just putting a strategy together without taking even just a little bit of time to dig into the data and the research around their audience.
What's the most fun campaign you've ever worked on?
Ooh, most fun? That's a good one. Actually, I'd have to go back to the Playa Bowls story because that was just, such a cool brand. It, it resonated with me and my lifestyle and just had a lot of fun kind of growing that and seeing them get successfully acquired. Just overall, great fun to work with them. And also just a cool brand in terms of the story and the artwork that goes into, every location. A lot of cool stuff.
What's your hot take on influencer marketing and B2B?
Ooh, in B2B, I think it's untapped right now, right? So I think that there should definitely be more of it, especially in B2B, because they're just kind of following this old playbook where they should be really, zeroed in on demand gen and thought leadership. And influencers are a great way to do that.
If you weren't doing marketing, what would you be doing?
If I was not doing marketing, I would probably still be in business. I would probably be an entrepreneur, maybe, maybe a product-centric company, technology, because I love technology, or I'd be working for a video game company because I just love the space.
Where can folks find you online?
They can follow me on LinkedIn. Just check out my name. I'm always posting about marketing and performance media trends, or they can visit our website, vallomedia.com.
Well, thanks for coming on, Anthony. Really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.